Hi guys, welcome back. We just had a look at the changes to the French tank tree in the 7.5 test server, and now we're going to have a quick look at the Americans. So what's changed in the American tree? Well, the M46 pattern isn't top dog in the medium tank line anymore. That honour goes to the M48A1. How has the pattern changed? Well, it's had a number of slight nerfs. The view range has been dropped. It no longer has the longest view range in the game. It's been dropped by 10 meters with this turret. There's a whole bunch of soft nerfs, really pretty minor. It hasn't affected it that badly. If you have a look at the forums, I mean, I don't have time to go into all of the changes here. The pattern hasn't really changed that much. If you have a look at the EU forums, link in the description below, there's a whole list of all the changes. But we're not here to look at the old tier 9 mediums, we're here to look at the tier 10s. So let's pop into the tech tree. And America, where are you? So there's the M46 pattern still at tier 9. Here's the new boy on the block, the M48A1. Now this is the only one of the tier 9 mediums that actually comes with some upgrade choices. And like the Batchat, which has an upgraded 105mm gun, so does the M48A1. Actually, I just totally contradicted myself there. The Batchat and the M48A1 are the only tier 10 mediums that have upgrade choices. Although it looks like you have a choice of 2 upgrades on the pattern. That's not strictly true, because if you go back to the M46, you will see that, that gun, the T5E1M2, you have to research that on the pattern to get to the M48A1 in the first place. And everybody who drives a pattern gets this gun because it's the best thing on the tank. So, and as with the Batchat, you're going to have that gun researched before you get the M48A1 in the first place. So your only real upgrade choice, I mean, it gets this 90mm stock gun, but it will never have it, because you'll always have that 105mm. So before we look at the gun, let's have a look at the vehicle details. And it's just generally, if we compare it to the M46, you'll see that it's just more of the same, but slightly better. 2,000 hit points, that's quite beefy. 300 more than the M46. Engine power, slightly less, so it's not as fast. Now that's an unusual choice. It's actually slower, not by much, but it is slower than the M46. We'll have to see how. I would expect it probably not to accelerate as well, but look at the difference in the traverse speed. I mean, the pattern is quite manoeuvrable in the first place with 38 degrees per second traverse. But that is just off the charts. This thing is going to... In fact, let me just check this. I think that traverse is actually faster than the T50. Let's have a look. Where are you? It is. This thing turns faster than a T50-2. It's going to be so much fun to play. Wow, I didn't see that one coming. Anyway, let's get the M46 back up so we can continue the comparison. So yeah, less powerful engine, slower top end, but by God, that thing can shift. Look at that. Hull armour, yeah, better, still not good. Much better turret armour. It's not going to stop a tier 9 or 10 tank gun, but that is not bad. Definitely, I mean, that's good to see. Now, yeah, standard shell damage. Don't forget these stats are for the stock 90mm gun, which absolutely nobody uses. So, and once again, your pattern ends up with being the tank with the best view range in the game. They've nerfed that on the M46 by 10 meters with the second turret, just so they could give it to the M48A1. So, anyway, the guns. Let's have a look. So, obviously, that's the stock gun, but you will never use it because you have to get this gun unlocked in order to get the M48 in the first place. And how does it compare to the upgraded gun, which costs 45,000 XP, which isn't actually that much? I've seen lower tier guns that cost 60,000 XP to get, so that's quite good to see, but here we go. Right, the M68 gun has a faster rate of fire than the gun on the pattern. 268mm of penetration, so that's more than the Batchat, and it does basically the same damage, which isn't a bad thing because the pattern did have the biggest punch at tier 9 of any of the tier 9 mediums. And that is a very, very welcome buff to the accuracy, because that was the only thing that let the Patton's 105mm gun down. That just god-awful accuracy. It meant that you had to use the Patton medium to short range only. Anything over 200 meters, 250 meters, you really couldn't penetrate reliably, and you certainly couldn't aim for weak spots. Well, it's not that you couldn't penetrate reliably, you couldn't hit it reliably, and aiming for weak spots was out of the question unless you were really close. So that is a very welcome accuracy buff to the gun, and the aiming time seems to be much, much better as well. I must admit, I'm not 100% certain what these numbers mean. 1.7 seconds, I think, is when you're standing still, and 2.3, I think, is when you're on the move. Anybody knows different, please feel free to correct me in the comments. But that is just, well, it looks like a buff. So, there we go, that's the gun. Looks like being a very fun and interesting tank, with the changes between this and the M46. I mean, it's only lost 3 kilometers per hour top speed. I'd have to have a go on it, and I probably will at some point, to see what the acceleration's like. I don't expect the acceleration to be as good as on the M46, but the manoeuvrability is just off the charts. It looks like it is now the most manoeuvrable tank in the game. It actually leaves the T50-2 standing as far as turning ability goes, and that has got to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to playing this tank. But it's not the only new thing in the American line. We now have the T110E3 and T110E4 tank destroyers. As you can see, I haven't got that far down the tank destroyer lines with the Americans. I'm stuck here at tier 7 with the T25/2. I have the XP to unlock the T28 prototype, but I've been holding off on it until I could accumulate enough XP to get that 120mm gun as well, because these guns are just... But we're not here to look at the T28 prototype, so let's see how the T110E3 compares against the T95. So, basic stats. Well, any T95 driver is going to be very pleased to know that while this thing is by no means fast, it's a damn sight faster than the T95. It's double the engine horsepower for effectively the same, and it weighs less as well. So yeah, it's much quicker. It's got the same hull armor. I don't know. I'd imagine it probably looking at more or less the same weak spot areas. I don't drive either of these. I couldn't really be too precise on that. And again, the penetration of the guns and blah blah. Well, that depends on what gun you have fitted, so we can't really look into that too much. But it does have an excellent view range, 400 meters. That's a very, very long-sighted tank destroyer. And better signal range, much better signal range on the radio. Although that's kind of deceptive, because at tier 9 this thing has a bunch of radio upgrades, and you're going to see that the stock radio on the tier 10s is the best radio you can get. You don't normally have to spend XP on engine upgrades for tier 10. On radio upgrades for tier 10 vehicles. So let's see how the guns compare. So there's the big boy on the T95, and here's the big boy on the T110E3. Now, obviously, you would expect it to be better, but how is it better? Well, they're both 155mm guns. It's got a much faster rate of fire. Well, it's not much faster, but you will feel the difference. Penetration. Look at that. Nearly 300mm of penetration. I mean, this is... Call me a pessimist, but this is putting the nail in the coffin of the German heavies, in my opinion. Armour. With guns like this in the game, armour doesn't mean a thing anymore. It's all about sloping and angling rather than actual armour thickness. But again, same as on the French tier 10, 850 average damage, and this thing is very accurate. It's certainly more accurate than T95, and it's faster aiming time. So this is just a general buff in every department over the gun on the T95, which was already a fearsome gun. So and it's the same gun that you get on the T110E4. So let's just have a quick look. Actually, where are we? There may very well be the same gun on both characteristics. T30 and T95. Yep, effectively, it's exactly the same gun that was on the T30, and that is the same gun that's on the T110E4. So the gun comparison is valid between the T95 and the T110E3 and the T30 and the E4. So let's see how the actual physical tanks stack up against each other. So these are the turreted tank destroyers. Now, before we actually look at the stats, the T110E4 has a turret and it does rotate, but it doesn't rotate 360 degrees. I think it's only 180, but it certainly doesn't turn all the way around. So just bear that in mind before we go in. Now, as you'd expect, it's got a hit point buff, over 2,000 hit points. Yeah, slightly more powerful engine, but it does weigh a little more, so the top speed ends up being exactly the same. What will be very welcome news to T30 drivers is that it turns faster. 28 degrees, that's 8 degrees per second faster than on the T30s. That's a very welcome change. It has a ridiculous amount of hull armour. That's more than double what the T30 has. However, that comes at a trade-off of less turret armour. It still has good turret armour, but it's nowhere near as practically impenetrable from the front as the T30 had. So there's the trade-off. So it turns faster, it's got a much better armoured hull, but the turret isn't as good. And that's kind of, I mean, it's based on the T110E5 Tier 10 heavy tank, so that's kind of consistent. That's what you'd expect to see. Excellent view range. You're finding this with most of the, certainly all the ones I've looked at yet. Very, very, very good view range on the Tier 10 tank destroyers. And we've already looked at the guns. So those are the Americans. Next, the Russians. Stay tuned.